The air in the Thorn Grand Ballroom was a thick, cloying perfume of wealth and ambition. Leo felt it stick to the back of his throat, a taste like chilled champagne and old money. He stood near the gilded service doors, a ghost in a starched black uniform, his posture a study in practiced invisibility. His job was to be a pair of hands, a silent presence that refilled glasses and cleared plates without ever truly being seen. For 8 hours he was not Leo, the single father with a late rent notice tucked in his wallet and a 5-year-old's crayon drawing of a superhero taped to the inside of his locker. He was just another part of the seamless, opulent machinery. His eyes scanned the crowd, a restless sea of couture gowns and bespoke suits. They glittered under the chandeliers, their laughter echoing off the impossibly high, frescoed ceiling. He felt a familiar ache settle deep in his bones, a weariness that had nothing to do with the hours he had spent on his feet. It was the exhaustion of pretending, of wearing a placid, professional mask over a landscape of quiet anxieties. He subtly touched his left wrist, his fingers brushing against the lump of the bracelet hidden beneath his crisp, white cuff. It was a simple, misshapen thing, made of garishly colored plastic beads Noah had painstakingly threaded onto a piece of string at preschool. Noah had called it his superpower bracelet, to keep him safe. It was Leo's anchor, the one real thing he carried with him into these unreal spaces. A shift in the room's energy, a subtle parting of the human sea drew his attention. Julian Thorn had arrived. He did not enter a room so much as conquer it. His presence was a magnetic force, pulling every eye, every hushed whisper into his orbit. He was exactly as the magazines portrayed him, impossibly tall, with dark hair cut with severe precision, and a face that seemed carved from unforgiving granite. He wore a tuxedo that probably cost more than Leo's car, the black fabric absorbing the light and making him seem even more formidable. Leo had seen him before, of course, from a distance, at other Thorn Industries events. He was a legend, a titan of finance who had inherited an empire and quadrupled its worth before his 30th birthday. He was also their host tonight, and the reason for the tense, electric atmosphere. Deals were being made in hushed tones over canapes, alliances forged and broken with the clinking of crystal flutes. From his vantage point, Leo saw the man behind the myth. He saw the faint lines of fatigue etched around his cool gray eyes. He saw the way his smile, when it appeared, never quite reached them. He looked isolated, a king on a throne of his own making, surrounded by courtiers, but utterly alone. For a fleeting moment, Leo felt a strange, unwelcome pang of empathy for the most powerful man in the city. He shook the thought away, turning his focus back to his duties. He picked up an empty tray and began a slow, methodical circuit of the room's perimeter. He moved with an efficiency born of long practice, his expression neutral, his movements economical. As he reached the far side of the ballroom, near a set of French doors leading to a stone balcony, he saw a familiar, dreaded figure slip inside. Mark. Leo's blood went cold. The tray in his hands felt suddenly heavy, the floor unstable beneath his feet. Mark had no business being here. This was a closed event, security tighter than a drum. Yet there he was, his cheap suit an insult to the surrounding finery, his eyes scanning the crowd with a predatory gleam. Then, they found Leo. A smirk played on Mark's lips. He started towards him, weaving through the oblivious guests with a purpose that made Leo's stomach clench. Panic, cold and sharp, seized him. He couldn't have a scene here. Not here. This job was precarious enough as it was. He quickly set his tray down on a nearby table and tried to turn, to melt back towards the service entrance. But it was too late. Leo? Mark's voice was a low hiss, laced with the same false charm that had once fooled him. Fancy seeing you here. Moving up in the world, are we? Mark, you can't be here, Leo whispered, his voice tight. He kept his back angled away from the main crowd, trying to shield the interaction. How did you even get in? I have my ways, Mark said, waving a dismissive hand. He stepped closer, invading Leo's personal space. The faint, sour smell of whiskey was on his breath. I need to talk to you. It's about Noah. This isn't the time or the place. Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. Every nerve ending screamed at him to run. Oh, I think it is. Mark's voice dropped, its edge turning hard and mean. You've been ignoring my calls. You think you can just cut me out? I need money, Leo. That little stunt with the lawyer cost me, and you're going to pay me back. I don't have any money, Mark. You know that. You're working in a place like this, he sneered, gesturing at the opulence around them. Don't lie to me. I know you've got something squirreled away, or you will have. His eyes narrowed. I'm his father. I have rights. Maybe it's time I exercise them. A judge might think a boy needs his other dad around, especially if his primary caregiver is struggling so much. The threat hung in the air, suffocating Leo. It was his deepest fear, the one Mark always used as his most potent weapon. The thought of Noah being subjected to Mark's volatile, selfish nature was unbearable. Don't you dare, Leo breathed, a desperate anger flaring through the fear. Give me what I want, and I'll be a ghost. Mark promised, his tone slick with manipulation. He reached out, his hand closing around Leo's arm, his grip painfully tight. Don't make this difficult. It was then that a third voice, quiet and cold as ice, cut through the tension. Is there a problem here? Both Leo and Mark froze. They turned to see Julian Thorne, standing just a few feet away. He hadn't approached with any fanfare. He had simply materialized, a pillar of silent authority. His gray eyes were fixed on Mark's hand, still clamped around Leo's arm. The look in them was flat, devoid of emotion, yet it carried more menace than any shouted threat. Mark, to his credit, was momentarily speechless. He let go of Leo's arm as if it had burned him. Mr. Thorne, he stammered, his bravado evaporating. We were just having a private conversation. Julian's gaze shifted from Mark to Leo. He saw the raw panic in Leo's eyes, the faint red marks already forming on his skin where Mark had gripped him. Something inside him, a dormant, protective instinct he hadn't felt in years, stirred. He had noticed the quiet waiter earlier, had been struck by the weary grace in his movements, the profound sadness in his eyes. Seeing him now, cornered and afraid, sparked an unexpected and decisive resolve. He took a deliberate step forward, smoothly positioning himself between Leo and Mark. He didn't look at Mark again. His attention was entirely on Leo, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. Darling, Julian said, the endearment spoken with such casual, convincing intimacy that it made Leo's breath catch in his throat. I was looking for you. He reached out, not with force, but with a gesture of profound gentleness, and placed a hand on the small of Leo's back. The warmth of his palms seeped through the thin fabric of Leo's uniform, a steady, grounding pressure. Our car is ready, Julian continued, his voice a low, calm murmur meant only for him. He then raised his eyes, his gaze sweeping over Mark with dismissive contempt. This gentleman was just leaving. It was not a question. It was a command wrapped in silk. Mark's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally a dawning, impotent rage. He looked from the powerful CEO to the lowly waiter, his mind unable to bridge the gap. Partner? Mark choked out, the word dripping with scorn. You're with him? Julian's hand on Leo's back tightened ever so slightly, a silent message of support. I believe I made myself clear, he said, his voice dropping another degree. Leave. Now. He didn't need to raise his voice. The sheer, undisputed power he wielded was enough. He flicked his eyes towards two broad-shouldered men in dark suits near the entrance, a silent signal. Mark saw the security detail begin to move. Defeated, he cast one last venomous glare at Leo before turning and stalking away, swallowed by the crowd and escorted from the building. The entire exchange had taken less than a minute. To Leo, it had felt like a lifetime. He was left standing in the sudden, quiet vacuum of Mark's absence, Julian's hand still a warm, solid presence on his back. He was trembling, the adrenaline slowly beginning to recede, leaving him shaky and nauseous. "Are you all right?" Julian's voice was low, stripped of the public persona and laced with genuine concern. Leo could only manage a jerky nod, unable to find his voice. He felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the whiplash of fear and the stunning, unexpected rescue. "Let's get you out of here," Julian said softly. He guided Leo away from the ballroom, not towards the service corridors, but through a private side door Leo hadn't even known existed. It led to a quiet, carpeted hallway, the opulent noise of the party instantly muffled. The silence was profound. Leo leaned against the cool wall, closing his eyes for a moment, trying to get his breathing under control. The solid weight of Julian's presence beside him was the only thing keeping him upright. "Thank you," he finally managed to say, the words feeling small and inadequate. "He won't bother you again tonight," Julian stated, his tone leaving no room for doubt. He was watching Leo closely, his gaze analytical yet gentle. "My head of security will ensure he's not permitted on any of my properties again." Leo looked at him then, truly looked at him. The intimidating CEO was gone. In his place was a man whose eyes held a quiet, watchful gravity. He was still trying to process the lie Julian had told, the casual, possessive endearment he had used as a shield. "Darling, our car." It had been a performance, a brilliant strategic move to de-escalate and dismiss, but the memory of it sent a confusing warmth through him. "You didn't have to do that," Leo said, his voice barely a whisper. "You could get in trouble. People might have heard." "I own the building, the company, and half the people in that room," Julian replied, not with arrogance, but with a simple statement of fact. "Let them talk." He paused, his expression unreadable. Who was he? Leo hesitated. He didn't want to unload his messy, complicated life onto this stranger, this powerful man who had already done so much. "My ex," he said, the word tasting like ash. "Noah's other father." Julian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He understood. The brief, ugly scene he had witnessed suddenly clicked into a much darker context. The possessive grip, the whispered threats. It wasn't a simple argument. It was a pattern. "Let me take you home," Julian said. It wasn't a request. "You don't have to. I can get a cab. I still have to sign out." "I'll have my assistant handle it," Julian cut him off gently. "Your shift is over. Come on." He led Leo through a series of quiet corridors to a private elevator. The ride down was silent. Leo was hyper-aware of everything. The soft hum of the elevator, the clean, expensive scent of Julian's cologne, the few inches of space separating them. He felt raw, exposed, as if Julian's act of kindness had stripped away his carefully constructed armor. The parking garage was cool and dim. Julian's car, a sleek, dark sedan, was waiting. A driver stood by the door, but Julian waved him off. "I'll drive," he said, and the driver simply nodded and disappeared. Julian held the passenger door open for Leo. The gesture felt strangely formal and deeply considerate. Leo slid into the supple leather seat, the door closing with a soft, solid thud that sealed them in a cocoon of quiet luxury. The world outside, the gala, Mark, all of it felt a million miles away. Julian got in and started the car. The engine was a low, powerful purr. He didn't turn on the radio. He just drove, his large hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. "Where to?" he asked after a few moments, his voice calm and even. Leo gave him his address, the name of his modest, slightly run-down apartment building, sounding alien in the opulent confines of the car. He expected a reaction, a flicker of judgment, but Julian's expression remained unchanged. He simply typed it into the navigation system. They drove through the glittering city streets in a comfortable silence. Leo watched the lights blur past, his mind replaying the scene in the ballroom. Julian's intervention had been so swift, so absolute. He had wielded his power like a surgeon's scalpel, excising the threat with clean precision. And he had done it for a complete stranger. "Why?" Leo asked, the question escaping before he could stop it. Julian glanced at him, his profile illuminated by the passing streetlights. "Why what? Why did you help me? You don't even know me." Julian was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the road. "I don't like bullies," he said finally, his answer simple and direct. "And you looked like you needed help." He paused. "I know what it's like to feel cornered." The admission was unexpected, a crack in the granite facade. It hinted at a history Leo couldn't possibly imagine, and it forged a strange, thin thread of connection between them in the quiet darkness of the car. When they pulled up in front of Leo's building, the contrast between the gleaming luxury car and the weathered brick facade was stark. Leo felt a familiar curl of shame. This was his life, a world away from the one Julian inhabited. "Thank you again," Leo said, reaching for the door handle. "For everything." "Wait," Julian said. He turned off the car, plunging them into silence again. "I'll walk you up." "You really don't have to." "I insist." There was no arguing with him. Leo led the way up the 3 flights of stairs, the echo of their footsteps loud in the narrow hallway. He felt Julian's presence behind him, a steady, protective shadow. When he reached his apartment door, number 3B, he fumbled with his keys, his hands still shaking slightly. As he finally got the door open, a small voice called out from inside. "Leo? Is that you?" A tiny boy with a wild mop of sandy brown hair and sleep-rumpled pajamas appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Noah. Standing just behind him was Mia, Leo's friend and co-worker who had been babysitting. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene. A disheveled Leo and the formidable Julian Thorne standing on the threshold of their tiny apartment. Noah's sleepy gaze fell on Julian. He stared, his head tilted with a child's unfiltered curiosity. He took in Julian's height, his expensive suit, his serious expression. "Wow," Noah breathed, his voice full of awe. "You're very tall." A ghost of a smile touched Julian's lips, the first genuine one Leo had seen all night. It transformed his face, softening the harsh lines and revealing a startling warmth. He crouched down, effortlessly bringing himself to Noah's level. "And you're very observant," Julian said, his voice gentle. Noah was not intimidated in the slightest. He stepped forward, his small hand reaching out. He gently poked the sleeve of Julian's tuxedo. "Is this a superhero costume?" he asked, with complete sincerity. The question was so innocent, so perfectly Noah, that Leo felt a bubble of laughter escape him, breaking the tension that had been coiled in his chest for hours. Julian looked down at his suit, then back at Noah, a flicker of something soft and unguarded in his eyes. "Something like that," he replied gravely. "Sometimes I have to pretend to be a grown-up." Noah nodded sagely, as if this made perfect sense. He looked from Julian to Leo. "Are you Leo's new friend?" Leo opened his mouth to explain, to try and untangle the complicated events of the night into something a 5-year-old could understand. But Julian spoke first. "Yes," he said, his gaze meeting Leo's over Noah's head. "I am." The simple, unequivocal answer hung in the air. feeling more real and more significant than the elaborate lie he had told just an hour before. Mia, watching from the doorway, raised a single, knowing eyebrow. She saw it all. The following days were a tense, quiet ripple effect from the night of the gala. Mark, true to form, did not disappear. The calls started first. Voicemails filled with wheedling apologies that quickly devolved into bitter accusations and thinly veiled threats. Then came the texts, rapid-fire messages that made Leo's phone buzz incessantly, each notification a fresh jolt of anxiety. Leo tried to ignore them, to block the number, but Mark was persistent, using burner apps and unknown numbers. He felt a constant, low-grade hum of fear, a sickness in the pit of his stomach that made it hard to eat or sleep. He was jumpy, flinching at every unexpected noise, his eyes constantly scanning the street outside his apartment window. Then, a small, blurry photo appeared on a gossip blog. It was a long lens shot, taken at the gala, showing Julian with his hand on Leo's back, his body angled protectively. The headline was speculative and snide. Julian Thorne's mystery man, a new power couple, or a passing fancy? Leo felt his world tilt. He had been so careful for so long, living a small, quiet life to avoid drawing any attention that might provoke Mark. Now, he was linked to one of the most high-profile men in the country. He was terrified. He called his manager at the catering company, apologizing profusely, but the damage was done. He was quietly, unofficially, taken off the roster for all future Thorne Industries events. He had become a liability. He didn't hear from Julian, and he was perversely grateful. He wanted to fade back into the anonymity he had once found so suffocating. He wanted to forget the feeling of Julian's hand on his back, the unexpected safety he had felt in his presence. It was a fantasy, a brief, dangerous interlude in his very real, very complicated life. The illusion of a return to normalcy was shattered on a Tuesday afternoon. Leo was walking Noah home from the park when he saw him. Mark was standing across the street from their building, just watching. He wasn't doing anything, just leaning against a wall, his arms crossed, a chillingly patient look on his face. Leo's blood ran cold. He quickly pulled Noah close, turning them around and walking briskly in the opposite direction, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He took refuge in a small coffee shop, his hands trembling so badly he could barely order a hot chocolate for Noah. He stayed there until dusk, until he was sure Mark must have gone. But the feeling of being watched lingered. Mark had crossed a line. He had brought his poison to their home, to Noah's world. That night, after he had put Noah to bed, Leo sat in the dark, his phone in his hand. He was scrolling through his contacts, his thumb hovering over Mia's name, when a text from an unknown number came through. "I know you have money now. Your rich boyfriend can spare it. Don't make me come and ask him myself." The threat was clear, and it wasn't just about him anymore. Mark was threatening to go after Julian. The thought of his mess bleeding into Julian's life, of repaying his kindness with this kind of ugliness, was mortifying. Before he could spiral further, there was a knock on his door. It was a firm, steady knock, not Mark's impatient rapping. Leo's heart leaped into his throat. He crept to the door and looked through the peephole. It was Julian. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than Leo remembered. He was wearing a simple gray sweater and dark trousers, no trace of the powerful CEO. He just looked like a man, a worried man. Leo opened the door, a question in his eyes. "I'm sorry to come by unannounced," Julian said, his voice low. "Can I come in?" Leo stepped back, allowing him into the small living room. Julian's presence seemed to fill the entire space. He looked around, his gaze taking in the worn but tidy furniture, the scattered children's books, the crayon drawing of a lopsided rainbow taped to the refrigerator. "How did you know about the texts?" Leo asked, his voice barely a whisper. He assumed that was why he was here. Julian's expression was grim. "I had my security team look into him after that night. They've been monitoring his communications. It's a standard precaution when there's a potential threat." He met Leo's gaze. "He's escalating. He was outside your building today." Leo flinched, the confirmation of his fear hitting him like a physical blow. "I saw him." "This is no longer a tenable situation, Leo," Julian said, his tone firm but not unkind. "You and Noah aren't safe here." "What am I supposed to do?" Leo's voice cracked. "I can't afford to move. I just lost my best-paying gig because of that stupid photo. He has me trapped." "No, he doesn't," Julian said. He took a step closer. "I want you and Noah to come and stay with me at my apartment. It's secure, completely. He won't be able to get anywhere near you." The offer was so astounding, so far beyond the realm of possibility, that Leo could only stare at him. "Stay with you? I can't do that. We're strangers." "We're not strangers," Julian countered softly. "And this isn't about that. This is about keeping your son safe. That's all that matters right now, isn't it?" He was right, of course. Noah's safety was paramount. The thought of Noah being safe, truly safe, behind layers of security, away from Mark's reach, was a siren song of relief. But the implications were terrifying. To put himself so completely in this man's debt, to move his child into the home of someone he barely knew. "I don't know," Leo whispered, torn. Julian seemed to understand his hesitation. "Leo, look at me." He waited until Leo's eyes met his. "I will not let anything happen to you or your son. I give you my word." There was a certainty in his voice, an absolute conviction that cut through Leo's fear. He saw it again, that quiet, formidable strength. He wasn't offering charity. He was offering a fortress. Leo thought of Noah sleeping peacefully in the next room, blissfully unaware of the danger that was circling their lives. He thought of Mark's cold eyes, his escalating desperation. He had no other choice. He gave a slow, shaky nod. "Okay." The relief that washed over Julian's face was profound. It was as if he had been holding his breath, waiting for the answer. "Good," he said. "Pack a bag for you and Noah. Just the essentials for a few days. I'll have anything else you need sent over. A car is waiting downstairs." The move was a blur. Leo packed a small suitcase with numb efficiency, his movements automatic. He gently woke Noah, who was groggy and confused, but brightened immediately when he saw Julian. "Are we going on an adventure?" Noah asked, his eyes wide. "Yes," Julian answered, lifting the boy easily into his arms. "A big one." Julian's apartment was less a home and more a kingdom in the sky. It occupied the entire top 2 floors of the Thorn Tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking, god-like view of the city lights, spread out like a carpet of fallen stars. The space was vast, minimalist, and immaculate. It was decorated in shades of charcoal, slate, and cream, with stark modern art on the walls, and furniture that looked more like sculpture than something a person would actually sit on. It was beautiful, impressive, and profoundly lonely. "You and Noah can have the guest wing," Julian said, leading them down a long hallway. "It has its own sitting room, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom. It should be comfortable." It was more than comfortable. The guest bedroom alone was larger than Leo's entire apartment. A king-sized bed was piled high with soft linens, and a door led to a marble-clad bathroom that looked like it belonged in a 5-star hotel. "This is..." Leo started, but words failed him. "It's temporary," Julian said, though his tone was anything but. "Until we sort things out with Mark." He settled a sleepy Noah into the bed, pulling the covers up to his chin with a surprisingly gentle touch. "Get some rest. We can talk in the morning." He left them, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the cavernous silence. Leo stood in the middle of the opulent room, feeling like an imposter. He was a castaway, washed ashore on an impossibly luxurious and foreign island. The days that followed settled into a strange, surreal routine. Julian would leave early for work, a silent presence in a sharp suit, and return late in the evening. A housekeeper, a kind woman named Elena, came during the day and seemed unfazed by their presence. She doted on Noah, baking him cookies and showing him the apartment's hidden media room, which had a screen the size of a garage door. For the first time in years, Leo felt the crushing weight of constant vigilance begin to lift. He knew, with an absolute certainty, that Mark could not reach them here. The relief was so profound it was almost painful. He started to sleep through the night again. He watched the tension ease from Noah's small shoulders, replaced by the simple, unadulterated joy of exploring his new castle in the sky. It was in the quiet moments that the connection between them deepened. It wasn't in grand gestures, but in small, domestic intimacies. One evening, Leo was in the sleek, industrial kitchen, attempting to make a simple pasta dish. He felt out of place, a trespasser in a space clearly designed for caterers, not home cooking. Julian came in, having shed his suit jacket and rolled up the sleeves of his white shirt. He watched Leo for a moment, a small smile playing on his lip. "Need some help?" he asked. "I think I'm making a mess of your $10,000 stove," Leo admitted, a flush creeping up his neck. Julian came to stand beside him, taking the wooden spoon from his hand. "The secret is to add a little of the pasta water to the sauce," he said, his voice a low murmur. His arm brushed against Leo's as he stirred, a spark of warmth that felt both innocent and electric. They cooked together in a comfortable silence, their movements falling into an easy rhythm, the vast kitchen suddenly feeling warm and full. Another night, Leo found Julian in his study, a cavernous room lined with books, staring at a complex series of charts on a glowing monitor. He looked exhausted, the weight of his empire heavy on his shoulders. Leo quietly placed a mug of tea on the desk beside him. Julian looked up, his eyes weary but grateful. "Thank you." "You should get some sleep," Leo said softly. "Soon," Julian promised, but he turned away from the screen and picked up the mug, cradling it in his hands as if it were a lifeline. They sat in silence for a few moments, the quiet companionship a balm for them both. The most profound shift, however, came through Noah. Noah, with his pure, uncomplicated heart, saw no walls, no power dynamics. He saw only Julian. He would wait by the door in the evenings to show Julian his latest drawing. He would crawl onto the sofa beside him and chatter on about his day. And Julian, the formidable CEO, would listen with an unnerving, patient stillness. One evening, Leo came out of his room to find the living area quiet. He found them in the library. Julian was sitting in a large leather armchair, and Noah was curled up against his side, fast asleep. An open copy of a children's book about a brave little dragon lay on Julian's lap. Julian wasn't reading. He was just sitting there, one hand resting protectively on Noah's small back, his expression one of quiet contemplation. He looked up and saw Leo in the doorway. He didn't look startled or awkward. He looked right. In that moment, Leo saw past the wealth and the power. He saw a man who was profoundly lonely, a man who was starved for the simple, unconditional affection that a child gives so freely. And he saw a man who was, against all logic, creating a space for them, a sanctuary. The pretense of a temporary arrangement was wearing thin, replaced by the terrifying, exhilarating possibility of something real. But the outside world could not be held at bay forever. The gossip about Julian and his mystery man hadn't died down. If anything, Leo's complete disappearance from public view only fueled the speculation. The pressure on Julian was mounting. Leo overheard snippets of hushed, tense phone calls Julian would take in his study. Phrases like board of directors, shareholder confidence, and unnecessary scandal. Mark, too, was not silent. Though he couldn't reach them directly, he started a campaign of harassment online, posting vague, threatening messages on social media, alluding to secrets and lies. He was trying to poison the well, to paint Leo as an unstable gold digger and Julian as a fool. The pressure culminated one rainy Thursday night. The storm outside mirrored the one brewing within the penthouse walls. The rain lashed against the panoramic windows, the city lights blurred and distorted. Julian had come home late, his face a mask of controlled fury. He had a file in his hand, which he dropped onto the polished surface of the dining table. "My legal team compiled this," he said, his voice tight. "It's everything on Mark. His debts, his prior arrests for public intoxication, a restraining order from a previous partner. It's all here." Leo stared at the file, his stomach churned. "We can use this," Julian continued, pacing the room like a caged panther. "We can file for a permanent restraining order, petition to have his parental rights terminated. We can bury him so deep in legal trouble he'll never bother you again." He sounded so certain, so powerful. He was offering Leo a final, absolute solution. But Leo felt a surge of despair. It all felt so ugly, so public. It meant dragging Noah, even tangentially, through a brutal court battle. It meant his private pain becoming public record. And it meant chaining himself even more tightly to Julian, relying on his power, his money, his lawyers. "I can't," Leo whispered, shaking his head. "I can't keep doing this." Julian stopped pacing. "What do you mean? This is the way out." "This is your way out!" Leo's voice rose, filled with a week's worth of pent-up fear and confusion. "You solve problems by throwing money and lawyers at them. But this is my life, Julian, my son. I can't just bulldoze my way through it. The scandal, the gossip, the pressure on you from your company. I'm ruining your life. I'm bringing all this trouble to your door." Tears of frustration pricked at his eyes. "Noah and I need to go. We can't stay here. I can't let you fight my battles for me anymore. It's not fair to you." He turned, intending to go to his room, to pack their single suitcase and walk away, to disappear and try to handle things on his own, however impossibly. "Don't!" Julian's voice was sharp, cutting through Leo's frantic thoughts. Leo stopped, his back to him. "Don't you dare walk away from me," Julian said, his voice softer now, but strained with an emotion Leo couldn't identify. "Do you really think this is about fairness? Do you think I'm doing this out of some sense of obligation?" He crossed the room in a few long strides, stopping just behind Leo. The heat of his body was a palpable presence. "This has nothing to do with my lawyers or my money," Julian said, his voice a low, ragged whisper. "This has to do with the fact that for the first time in a decade, my house doesn't feel like a sterile museum. It feels like a home. It's because of the sound of your son's laughter in the hallway. It's because of the way you look when you think no one is watching, with all the weight of the world on your shoulders." Leo stood, frozen, barely breathing, every word landing like a stone in the quiet pool of his heart. Julian's voice cracked with a vulnerability that shattered his formidable composure. "I spent my entire life building walls, Leo. Fortresses. To keep everyone out. And in a week, you and a 5-year-old boy have torn them all down without even trying. This isn't a battle I'm fighting for you. I'm fighting it with you. For us." He finally confessed the weakness he had hidden from the world. "My life was empty. A series of acquisitions and board meetings. I had everything and nothing. And then you fell into my world, and I realized what I was missing." He took a shaky breath. I'm so tired of pretending, Leo. Leo turned slowly to face him. The truth of it all was there, blazing in Julian's gray eyes. The carefully constructed narrative, the protector and the protected, the temporary arrangement, it all fell away, leaving only the raw, undeniable connection that had been growing between them in the quiet spaces. Pretending what? Leo asked, his voice thick with unshed tears, needing to hear him say it. That this is just about keeping you safe, Julian whispered, his gaze intense. That you are just a guest in my home. That I can stand this close to you and not. His words trailed off. He reached out, his hand coming up to cup Leo's cheek. His thumb stroked gently across his skin, a touch so tender it made Leo's knees feel weak. The storm raged outside, a wild symphony of wind and rain, but inside the penthouse, the world had gone utterly still. I'm falling in love with you, Leo, Julian confessed, the words raw and certain. And it terrifies me. That was it. The final wall crumbled. Leo felt a sob of pure, overwhelming relief break from his chest. He surged forward, his hands gripping the front of Julian's sweater, and met his mouth in a kiss that was both a surrender and a declaration. It was not a gentle kiss. It was desperate, hungry, filled with all the unspoken fear and hope and longing of the past few weeks. It was the taste of rain and safety, of loneliness and homecoming. Julian's arms wrapped around him, pulling him tight against his chest, his own desperation matching Leo's. He deepened the kiss, a groan of pure emotion rumbling in his chest. It was a kiss that sealed a promise, a silent vow made in the heart of the storm. The pretense was over. This was real. The morning after the storm felt like the first day of a new world. The rain had washed the city clean, and the sunlight that streamed through the vast windows was sharp and bright, making everything look new. The emotional clarity between them was just as stark. The confession, the kiss, it had changed everything. There was a new shyness between them, but also a deep, underlying certainty. They found their way to the kitchen, moving around each other with a quiet, careful grace. Julian made coffee, while Leo started making pancakes for Noah, who was still asleep. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full, humming with the things that no longer needed to be said. Finally, Julian leaned against the counter, a steaming mug in his hands, and looked at Leo. We need a plan, he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were serious. A real one, not just hiding you away here. Leo nodded, flipping a pancake. He felt a sense of calm he hadn't experienced in years. He wasn't alone in this anymore. Okay. First, Julian said, setting his mug down with a decisive click, we deal with Mark, but we do it on our terms, not reacting to his threats, but taking control of the narrative. He paused. I need you to be honest with me, Leo. Do you want him in Noah's life? In any capacity? Leo thought for a long moment. He thought of Noah's easy smile, his trusting heart. He thought of Mark's volatility, his selfishness. No, he said, his voice firm. He's not safe. For Noah or for me. I want him gone. All right, Julian said, a look of grim determination on his face. He picked up his phone and made a call. David, it's Julian. I need you to draw up the paperwork. Everything we discussed. Petition for sole custody, a permanent restraining order with a proximity clause, and I want to file a civil suit for harassment and extortion. Yes, I have proof. I'll send the files now. I want it filed by noon. He hung up and looked at Leo. The sheer speed and decisiveness with which he operated was staggering. He was a force of nature when he had a clear objective. And his objective, Leo realized with a dizzying sense of wonder, was them. Their safety. Their future. What about the other thing? Leo asked quietly. The press. You're bored. Julian's expression softened. He walked over to Leo, taking the spatula from his hand and setting it aside. He took Leo's hands in his own. That's the second part of the plan, he said. I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of living my life in a way that pleases a group of shareholders. My father built this company, but he died in his office. He never lived. I'm not going to make the same mistake. He took a deep breath. I'm calling a press conference for this afternoon, and I'm going to introduce you. Leo's eyes widened in shock. Introduce me? As what? Julian, that will be a catastrophe. They'll tear us apart. They'll say I'm a gold digger, that you've lost your mind. Let them, Julian said, his grip on Leo's hands tightening. The truth is, I haven't been this sane in my entire life. He smiled, a small, genuine smile. I'm going to tell them that I've met someone, that we are building a life together. I will introduce you as my partner, and I will make it very clear that any attack on you or your son is an attack on me, and by extension, on this company. We will present a united front. No apologies, no explanations. It was a terrifying, audacious plan. It was taking the gossip and the scandal and owning it, refusing to be shamed or intimidated. It was an act of profound commitment. Are you sure? Leo whispered. I've never been more sure of anything, Julian said. He leaned in and kissed him, a soft, reassuring kiss that tasted of coffee and promises. We faced this together. That afternoon, Leo stood just off stage in a small, private conference room at Thorn Tower. His heart was hammering against his ribs. He was wearing a simple but elegant sweater and trousers that Julian's assistant had procured, and he felt like a man about to walk into a den of lions. On stage, Julian stood at a podium, facing a barrage of flashing cameras and shouted questions. He looked completely calm, the picture of control. He held up a hand, and the room instantly fell silent. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, he began, his voice resonant and steady. I know there has been a great deal of speculation regarding my personal life recently. I'm here today to put that speculation to rest. He spoke about his dedication to the company, his plans for the future. Then, his tone shifted, becoming more personal. For a long time, this company has been my entire life. But recently, my priorities have evolved. I have met someone who has reminded me that there is more to life than quarterly reports and stock prices. He turned and looked directly at Leo, his eyes finding him in the wings. He held out his hand. I would like you to meet my partner, Leo. Every camera, every eye in the room swiveled towards him. For a split second, Leo's courage failed him. Then he looked at Julian's outstretched hand, at the unwavering trust in his eyes. He took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. He took Julian's hand. It was warm and strong. The flashbulbs were blinding, the silence in the room deafening. Julian gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. Leo and his son have become my family, Julian stated, his voice ringing with conviction. His safety and happiness are my primary concern. This is not a temporary arrangement or a scandal. This is my life. We will be taking no questions on this matter. And with that, he squeezed Leo's hand again and led him off the stage, leaving behind a room of stunned, furiously scribbling reporters. The aftermath was a storm, but a manageable one. The story was everywhere. Some of the coverage was snide, but much of it, surprisingly, was not. Julian's bold, unapologetic stance had framed the narrative. He wasn't a victim of a scandal. He was a man in love, protecting his family. His approval ratings among his own employees, Mia later reported to Leo with glee, had skyrocketed. The legal proceedings against Mark were swift and brutal. Faced with a mountain of evidence and Julian Thorne's entire legal department, Mark crumbled. He signed away his parental rights and agreed to the restraining order in exchange for the civil suit being dropped. He disappeared from their lives as completely as if he had never existed. The ghost of the past had finally been exorcised. With the external threats neutralized, the reason for their forced proximity was gone. The penthouse was no longer a fortress, it was simply a home. But the question lingered, unspoken, in the quiet spaces between them. What now? One Saturday morning, Julian found Leo on the terrace, staring out at the city. "What are you thinking about?" Julian asked, coming to stand beside him. "This place," Leo said honestly. "It's beautiful. It kept us safe. But it's your home, Julian. It's not ours." Julian was quiet for a moment. "I agree," he said finally. "It's too big, too cold. It's a monument to a life I don't want to live anymore." He turned to face Leo. "I was thinking we could start looking for a new place. Together. A house, maybe. With a yard for Noah." Leo's heart swelled. It was a conscious choice, a sober, daylight conversation about building a future, not just surviving a present. "I'd like that," Leo said, a real brilliant smile spreading across his face. "I'd like that very much." Julian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, simple platinum band. It wasn't flashy or ostentatious. It was simple, elegant, and solid. He took Leo's left hand. "This isn't a grand proposal in a ballroom," Julian said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is just a promise. A promise that you and Noah are my home now, wherever we are. Will you let me put this on you, Leo? As a symbol that you never have to be alone again?" Tears streamed down Leo's face as he nodded, unable to speak. Julian slid the ring onto his finger. It was a perfect fit. He was no longer the burdened heart, and Julian was no longer just a powerful guardian. They were partners. They were family. 6 months later, the world was a different color. The crisp autumn air was filled with the scent of wood smoke and decaying leaves. Leo stood in the porch of a beautiful stone and glass house nestled in a quiet, tree-lined suburb, a mug of hot coffee warming his hands. The house was theirs. They had chosen it together. The sound of laughter drew his gaze to the sprawling green lawn. Julian, dressed in a worn pair of jeans and a soft flannel shirt, was chasing Noah through a pile of bright red and yellow leaves. Noah's shrieks of delight were the most beautiful sound Leo had ever heard. Julian finally caught him, scooping him up and swinging him around, both of them laughing until they were breathless. Julian looked over at Leo, his face flushed, his eyes bright with a happiness that seemed to radiate from his very core. He looked younger, lighter, the heavy burden of his empire replaced by the simple, profound joy of this moment. He was no longer the intimidating CEO from the gala. He was just Julian, the man who read dragon stories at bedtime and made terrible, lopsided pancakes on Sunday mornings. Mia came to stand beside him on the porch, a warm smile on her face. She had been their staunchest supporter, their first and most loyal friend. "You look happy," she said, bumping his shoulder with hers. "I am," Leo said, the words feeling simple but holding an ocean of meaning. He watched as Julian set Noah down and began walking towards the porch. Julian came up the steps, his arm sliding naturally around Leo's waist, pulling him close. He leaned in and kissed him, a slow, deep kiss that was as comfortable and familiar as breathing. "Everything okay?" Julian murmured against his lips. "Everything's perfect," Leo replied. Julian's eyes crinkled at the corners. He glanced down at Leo's hand, at the simple platinum band that now rested there, a constant, comforting weight. He lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, a playful glint in his eye. "Remember when I had to pretend you were mine just to get that guy to leave you alone?" Leo smiled. a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. He leaned his head against Julian's shoulder, looking out at their son, their yard, their life. "I'm so glad you don't have to pretend anymore," he said softly. Julian tightened his hold, his other hand coming up to gently cup Leo's cheek. He looked into his eyes, his own gaze filled with a love so deep and certain it took Leo's breath away. He sealed their future, not with words, but with a final, gentle kiss, a silent promise of 1,000 more sun-drenched autumn afternoons, of a lifetime of not pretending. It was just the beginning of their happily ever after.